Welcome to Disney's Magic of Storytelling podcast, brought to you by WakeMed Children's, because inside every child is a story waiting to be told. Our storyteller is ABC 11 meteorologist Dawn Schweneker.
Monsters, Inc. Basket of Trouble. Inside Monsters, Inc., Sulley was coming out the door of Scare Floor F, finishing his shift. As he and Mike headed for the locker room, they saw Charlie Proctor and George Sanderson standing outside another door. "Hey guys," George said, "I just scared an entire slumber party of little kids. They were dressed up like bunnies, which was odd. But now I'm thinking I'll be the 7th best scarer in no time." Charlie ran off to get started on his paperwork for Roz. As George turned to follow him, something made Sulley and Mike stop in their tracks and gasp. They both pointed at George's tail. Hanging off it was something terrible, something awful, something human. Spinning around at the sound of their gasps, George tried to see what had scared his friends. He spun until the object flew across the hall right into Sulley's hands. Sulley's eyes grew wide as he looked at the object. It was shaped like the bottom half of an Easter egg without the top. Then he realized exactly what it was. A basket. A human's basket. Sulley let out a very unmonstrous and threw it to Mike. Back and forth, the basket flew among them. Sulley to George, George to Mike, then back to George. None of them wanted to touch it. "This is," screeched George. "The worst!" yelled Sulley. "Keep it away from me," shouted Mike. Finally, Mike shouted, "Guys, keep it together. This is a human object, remember? We can't just stand here in the hallway with it." George nodded. "You're right. If Charlie sees me with this, I'll get another 2119, and I can't have another run-in with the CDA." He reached behind him and patted his backside. My fur just grew back. Mike took a deep breath. "Okay, first things first. We need to get to the locker room and stay there until we figure out a real plan." "How are we going to get it there?" asked Sulley. "I don't want to touch it again." Mike grabbed a gym bag and pulled out a pair of shoes and a hammer and a pair of sunglasses. No, he whispered to himself. Finally, he found his oven mitts. "Here you go, big guy." Sulley put them on and carefully picked up the basket. The three monsters made their way down the hall, bursting into the locker room. They ran into Charlie. "Charlie," George said, "what are you doing here?" "Why wouldn't I be here?" Charlie asked. Mike didn't hesitate. "Because, Charlie, we thought you were with Roz for the big award." "Big award?" Charlie repeated. Mike nodded. "I heard the CDA wanted to see you. Something about that special badge for your help with those 2319s. You really should get going." Full of excitement, Charlie raced out the door. The trio of monsters sighed in relief. They needed to get the basket back to its proper door and fast. But then the locker room door swung open and a group of monsters walked in. "Hey, fellas," one of the monsters said, greeting them. "Just grabbing my odorant." Noticing the basket in Sulley's hand, the monsters looked curious. "What is that? Did management send us a new scaring gear? Because that thing is pretty frightening. Look at all that pink. Let me take a look." "No," Sulley shouted, moving the basket away. Nah, don't bother. It's just a prototype. It didn't even work." Acting fast, George jumped onto the bench. All eyes turned to him. Hey, have you guys heard the one about the oven mitts?" The group of monsters waited for George to go on. "They were so hot. They were cool." As the other monsters groaned, Sulley slipped out. Mike hesitated. "George, tell him the one about where cows go for some fun," he said. And before George could say anything, another monster jumped in. "The movies. We've heard that one, but have you heard this one?" As the monster told his joke, Mike followed Sulley to the scare floor and called back to the doors that George had gone through that day. Sulley popped his head through each door, but he had no idea what he was looking for. And then Sulley remembered George had mentioned bunnies. He and Mike opened the door after door, one after another, and they didn't find any long-haired, fluffy-tailed critters, but Sulley did run into a very affectionate cow. Then Mike saw something green sticking out from under one of the doors. It was a piece of grass, the same grass that was on the basket. When they opened the door, they found the slumber party full of kids wearing bunny ears, and Sulley tiptoed into the room. All he had to do was put the basket down and get out of there before anyone noticed. "Easter Bunny, is that you?" And Sulley froze. One little girl was wide awake, staring at him with big, tear-filled eyes. Then Sulley noticed she didn't have a basket next to her or any of the other girls. "Easter Bunny?" the little girl said again. Not sure what else to do, Sulley put on the oven mitts as horns, then began to hop around like a bunny that he saw on a television in the room. Did you bring my Easter basket?" the girl asked. Sulley held out the basket, and the girl bounded to her feet and grabbed the handle. Sulley had begun to walk back to the door when, "Easter Bunny," the girl said again, stopping him. "You're blue. And, you don't really look like a bunny." "I'm in disguise," he whispered, turning to the door again. As Sulley opened the door back to Monsters, Inc., he heard the little girl whispered, "Silly blue bunny." And Sulley smiled and hopped through the door. Once he was safely back on Scare Floor F, he and Mike both let out relieved breaths. That one had been too close. "Those were some interesting moves back there," said Mike. "If scaring doesn't work out, maybe you could get a job being an Easter bunny, whatever that is." Sulley shrugged. "A scare's got to do what a scare's got to do," he replied as George caught up to him. "Hey, George, you should see Sulley's new trick. Show him, Sulley. Hop to it." The big blue monster smiled and began to hop down the hall. Behind him, George and Mike just laughed. The end.
WakeMed Children's is proud to support the ongoing enrichment of children in our community and beyond through our sponsorship of the Disney Magic of Storytelling podcast. To learn more about WakeMed Children's, please visit kids.wakemed.org.